The lecture hall buzzed with the usual morning chaos of sleepy students and the sharp scent of coffee. Professor Martinez droned on about galactic history, his voice barely competing with the whispered conversations and shuffling papers. In the third row, a young woman with short brown hair and unremarkable clothes took careful notes, her pen moving steadily across the page. Sarah Chen looked like any other 20-something university student. Her backpack was worn, her sneakers scuffed, and her face held the same tired expression as half the class. She raised her hand occasionally, asked thoughtful questions, and turned in assignments on time. Nothing about her suggested she was anything more than another face in the crowd. The Vortan War lasted 12 brutal years, Professor Martinez continued, clicking to the next slide. Humanity's survival hung by a thread until the emergence of tactical geniuses who turned the tide. Sarah's pen paused for just a moment before continuing its steady movement. Around her, students shifted in their seats, some playing games on their tablets, others fighting sleep. The war felt ancient to them, something from their parents' generation, distant and academic. The most famous of these heroes was Captain Sarah Ghost Chen, who single-handedly saved the colony of New Haven, with nothing but a damaged frigate and a crew of volunteers. The professor's voice carried a note of reverence. Her tactics are still studied in military academies across human space. A student in the front row raised his hand. "Professor, is it true she disappeared after the war? Like nobody knows what happened to her?" Martinez nodded gravely. Captain Chen vanished from public life immediately after the peace treaty was signed. Some say she died from her injuries. Others believe she wanted to live quietly, away from the fame and attention. She was only 26 when the war ended. Sarah kept writing, her expression unchanged, but her knuckles had gone white around her pen. She could feel the familiar weight of phantom metals on her chest, hear the echo of alarms and explosions that haunted her dreams. The professor clicked to a photograph, and there she was, younger and wearing a military uniform that seemed to belong to another lifetime. The image showed a confident officer with determination burning in her eyes, standing on the bridge of a warship with smoke and stars visible through the viewports behind her. The woman in the photo looked nothing like the tired student. Taking notes in row 3, Captain Chen's final battle at the Kepler station is considered one of the greatest military victories in human history, Martinez continued. Outnumbered 50-1, she used the station's gravity well in a brilliant feinting maneuver to destroy an entire Vorthan fleet. The aliens never recovered from that defeat. Sarah remembered that day differently than the history books told it. She remembered the terror, the desperate calculations, the weight of knowing that millions of lives depended on her next decision. She remembered the faces of the crew members who didn't make it home, the friends whose names were now carved into memorial walls she couldn't bear to visit. The class ended with the usual shuffle of papers and backpacks. Students filed out, chatting about weekend plans and upcoming assignments. Sarah packed her things slowly, letting the crowd thin before making her way to the exit. "Miss Chen," Professor Martinez called out as she reached the door. She turned, her heart skipping a beat. Had he recognized her? After all these years of careful anonymity, had someone finally connected the dots? "Your essay on resource allocation during wartime was exceptional," he said, smiling warmly. "Have you considered pursuing graduate studies in military history? You have real insight into strategic thinking." Sarah managed a small smile. "I'll think about it, Professor. Thank you." She walked across campus, blending seamlessly into the flow of students heading to their next classes. Nobody looked twice at her. Nobody saw the hero who had saved humanity from extinction. They saw exactly what she wanted them to see, nothing more than another face in the crowd. Her apartment was small and spartanly furnished, the kind of place a student on a tight budget might rent. But hidden behind a false panel in her closet was a small collection of items from her past life, a commendation medal, a photograph of her crew, and a datapad containing the real story of the Vorthan War, the parts that never made it into the history books. She touched the medal gently, feeling its familiar weight. Sometimes she wondered if she had made the right choice, disappearing into anonymity while others claimed credit for decisions she had made. But then she remembered the nightmares, the crushing responsibility, the way politicians had wanted to use her as a symbol rather than letting her heal. This quiet life was what she had fought for, the freedom to be ordinary, to sit in lectures and worry about assignments instead of the fate of entire star systems. She was Sarah Chen, the student now, not Captain Ghost Chen, the legend. But as she prepared for her next class, she couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully constructed new life was about to be disrupted. The galaxy had a way of pulling people back into the roles they thought they had left behind. Outside her window, ships moved across the sky in peaceful patterns, following trade routes that existed because she had made them possible. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had saved the galaxy so she could have the luxury of being forgotten by it. For now, that was enough. Tomorrow she had a test on pre-war economics, and tonight she needed to study. The legend could stay buried a little longer. The coffee shop near campus hummed with the usual afternoon energy. Sarah sat in her favorite corner booth, textbooks spread across the table, working on her assignment about interstellar trade regulations. The mundane topic felt like a blessing after years of making life-or-death decisions about supply lines and military logistics. She was deep in concentration when a shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she found herself face to face with a man in his 50s, wearing the kind of expensive suit that screamed, "Government official." His eyes held a recognition that made her blood run cold. "Miss Chen, or should I say Captain?" he said quietly, sliding into the seat across from her without invitation. Sarah's training kicked in instantly. Her muscles tensed, ready for action, while her face remained carefully neutral. "I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm just a student." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Director James Walsh, Galactic Intelligence Bureau. And no, I don't have you confused with anyone. The facial recognition software doesn't lie, even when someone has had very subtle reconstructive surgery." Her jaw clenched. She had hoped the minor changes to her bone structure would be enough to fool automated systems. Apparently, technology had improved since she went into hiding. "What do you want?" she asked, keeping her voice low. Walsh leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "There's a situation developing, one that requires someone with your particular expertise." "I'm retired," Sarah said firmly. "I made that very clear when I left the service. The Vorthons are moving again." The words hit her like a physical blow. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the phantom ache of old wounds. "That's impossible. We had a peace treaty. Their entire military structure was dismantled." "Not all of it," Walsh said grimly. He pulled out a data pad and slid it across the table. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected energy signatures consistent with Vorthon's stealth technology. Ships we've never seen before. Designs that suggest they've been building in secret for years. Against her better judgment, Sarah looked at the data. Her mind automatically began analyzing the patterns, identifying weak points and strategic implications. The old instincts died hard. "This doesn't make sense," she murmured, scrolling through the intelligence reports. Their homeworld was quarantined. We had observers monitoring all their remaining colonies. Apparently they were more clever than we gave them credit for. They've been using hidden bases in dead systems, building a new fleet. And Sarah, Walsh paused, waiting for her to look up. "They're not just coming back to fight. Our intelligence suggests they're planning something much worse." Sarah pushed the data pad back toward him. "Then send the fleet. Alert High Command. You don't need me for this. High Command is compromised." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah felt the world shift around her, the comfortable illusion of peace cracking like thin ice. "What do you mean, compromised?" Walsh glanced around the coffee shop, ensuring they weren't being overheard. "We've detected Vorthon infiltrators in key positions throughout the military hierarchy. We don't know how deep it goes or how long they've been in place, but someone has been feeding them detailed intelligence about our defensive capabilities." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If the Vorthons had been planning this for years, if they had people inside the human command structure, then the next war wouldn't be like the last one. Humanity's advantages would be neutralized before the fighting even began. "You need someone they don't know about," she said, understanding dawning. "Someone who's been off the grid long enough to be clean." "The Ghost Protocol," Walsh confirmed. "Officially, you died from your injuries 6 months after the war ended. There's no record of you existing beyond that point. You're the perfect asset for this situation." Sarah stared at her textbooks, at the normal life she had built so carefully. "I can't do it anymore, Walsh. The war took everything from me. I barely made it out with my sanity intact." "I know what you sacrificed," he said softly. "I read your real service record, the classified one. I know about the decisions you had to make, the prices you paid. But Sarah, there's something else you need to understand." He activated a holographic display on the data pad, showing star charts with red markers scattered across human space. They're not just targeting military installations this time. The first wave will hit civilian colonies, places with no defenses, no way to evacuate in time. Hundreds of millions of innocent people. Sarah closed her eyes, seeing faces from her past, remembering the reasons she had fought so hard the first time. The farmers on New Haven, who had thanked her with tears in their eyes. The children who would never have been born if she hadn't held the line at Kepler Station. "How long do we have?" she asked, already knowing she would say yes. Intelligence suggests 2 weeks before they're in position to launch their attack. Maybe less. "And you want me to do what exactly?" "I'm one person, Walsh. I can't fight an entire fleet with a history textbook and a cup of coffee." Walsh reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device that looked like an ordinary student ID card. "This contains everything you need to access a safe house in the outer colonies. Ships, weapons, a small team of volunteers who remember what you did for humanity the first time." Sarah picked up the device, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to represent the end of her peaceful life. "The team doesn't know who you really are," Walsh continued. "As far as they're concerned, you're just another intelligence operative with a good service record. Your identity remains protected, and if I say no," Walsh's expression grew grave, "then in 3 weeks we'll all be fighting for our lives again. Only this time, we won't have the element of surprise or superior tactics. We'll have desperate defense in the hope that someone else can pull off a miracle." Sarah gathered her textbooks and stuffed them into her backpack. The simple action felt like closing a door on a dream. "I need 12 hours to put my affairs in order." "Sarah," Walsh started. "Ghost," she corrected him. "If I'm doing this, then Sarah Chen, the student, stays buried. The galaxy needs its ghost back." As she walked away from the coffee shop, Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like an old coat. The peaceful life had been wonderful while it lasted, but the galaxy had always been too dangerous for heroes to stay retired for long. Behind her, Walsh watched until she disappeared into the crowd. He had been honest about the threat, but not about everything. The truth was even worse than what he had told her, and if she knew the full scope of what was coming, she might not have agreed to help. Sometimes, saving the galaxy required keeping heroes in the dark about just how impossible their mission really was. The safe house was a rundown mining facility on Titan's Edge, a desolate moon that had been stripped of resources decades ago. Sarah arrived under the cover name Agent Rivera, carrying nothing but a single duffel bag and the weight of her hidden identity. The transport pilot who had brought her asked no questions and left immediately, following protocols that suggested this operation was darker than most. Inside the facility's main hangar, she found 4 people waiting around a holographic display table. They looked up as she entered, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. These were clearly experienced operatives, but they carried themselves with the wariness of people who had seen too many missions go wrong. Agent Rivera, a tall woman with short-cropped blonde hair, stepped forward, extending her hand. "Commander Lisa Park, formerly of the 3rd Fleet. I'll be leading this operation." Sarah shook her hand, noting the firm grip, and the way Park's eyes quickly assessed her for threats and capabilities. "Good to meet you, Commander." "Just Lisa out here," Park replied. "We're operating off the books, so military protocols are flexible." She gestured to the others. "Let me introduce the team." The first was a stocky man with graying temples and engineer's tools clipped to his belt. Marcus Webb, ship's engineer and tech specialist. "I've kept more buckets of bolts flying than I care to count." Next was a younger woman with the lean build of a fighter, pilot and restless energy that suggested she was more comfortable in a cockpit than on solid ground. Rachel Torres, call sign Dash. "I can fly anything with engines and probably some things without them." The last team member was an older man whose bearing screamed Special Forces despite his civilian clothes. Kane Sullivan. Explosives, infiltration, and what the military politely calls problem solving. Sarah nodded to each of them, filing away the details her trained eye picked up. These weren't random volunteers. Each person here had been carefully selected for specific skills, and their body language suggested they had worked together before. "So what's our mission exactly?" Sarah asked, playing the role of an operative being briefed for the first time. Lisa activated the holographic display, showing a star map with several systems highlighted in red. "Intelligence indicates Vorthon forces are massing in these sectors. Our job is reconnaissance and, if possible, disruption of their operations." Marcus leaned forward, studying the display. That's a lot of empty space to cover. How do we even know where to start looking? We have leads on 3 possible staging areas, Lisa replied, highlighting specific systems. The plan is to investigate each one systematically, gather intelligence, and report back to command. Sarah studied the tactical display, her mind automatically analyzing patterns and strategic implications. Something felt wrong about the approach they were describing. The systems they had highlighted were too obvious, too exposed for a species as tactically sophisticated as the Vorthans. Have you considered that these might be decoys? She asked, trying to sound like she was making a casual observation, rather than drawing on years of experience fighting their enemy. Rachel raised an eyebrow. What makes you think that? Sarah pointed to the display, choosing her words carefully. The positioning doesn't make tactical sense. These systems are too far from major population centers to launch an effective surprise attack, but too close to our patrol routes to remain hidden for long. Kane nodded slowly. The lady has a point. If I were planning a sneak attack, I'd want my staging areas where nobody would think to look. Where would you suggest? Lisa asked, and Sarah could hear genuine interest in her voice. Sarah manipulated the holographic controls, highlighting a cluster of dead systems on the outer rim. Here. No resources worth mining, no strategic value, no reason for our ships to patrol them. Perfect for building up forces without detection. That's a lot of empty space, Marcus pointed out. If we're wrong, we'll waste weeks searching nothing. And if we're right, Sarah countered, we'll find their real base of operations before they're ready to move. Lisa studied the new target areas thoughtfully. It's a calculated risk. But given the timeline we're working with, we can't afford to waste time chasing false leads. As the team discussed logistics and approach vectors, Sarah found herself slipping back into tactical thinking. These people were competent, but they were approaching the mission like a standard military operation. The Vorthans didn't fight standard wars. There's something else we need to consider, she said during a pause in the planning. The Vorthans aren't just another alien species. They think differently than we do. Their tactical doctrine is based on psychological warfare as much as raw firepower. You sound like you've studied them extensively, Kane observed. Sarah felt a moment of panic. She was revealing too much knowledge, drawing too heavily on personal experience rather than intelligence briefings. I did my thesis on xenopsychology at the academy, she improvised. The Vorthan mindset was a major focus. It was close enough to the truth to be believable. She had studied their psychology extensively, but not in any classroom. She had learned it in the crucible of battle, watching their patterns, understanding their motivations through years of deadly chess matches across the stars. That could be useful, Lisa said. What kind of psychological tactics should we expect? Sarah considered how much she could reveal without giving herself away. They prefer to demoralize their enemies before engaging. Propaganda broadcasts, false intelligence, attacks designed to create fear rather than achieve military objectives. They want us to defeat ourselves. Sounds like they've been studying human nature too, Rachel muttered. They have, Sarah confirmed. But there's something they've never understood about humanity. They think our emotional responses are weaknesses to be exploited. They don't realize that those same emotions can be our greatest strength. Marcus checked his chronometer. Speaking of emotions, I'm starving. Anyone else want to grab some food before we dive deeper into this? As the team headed toward the facility's mess hall, Sarah lingered behind, studying the tactical display. The mission they had described was dangerous enough, but she suspected there were layers to this operation that none of them had been told about. Director Walsh had been holding something back during their meeting, and now she was wondering just how much these people knew about what they were really walking into. Agent Rivera? Lisa called from the doorway. You coming? Just reviewing the data one more time, Sarah replied. I'll catch up in a minute. Alone in the hangar, she allowed herself a moment to remember who she really was beneath the false identity. These people were about to follow her into danger, trusting her expertise to keep them alive. They deserved a leader who understood the true scope of the threat they faced, but they also deserved a leader who could make the hard choices when the time came. And as much as Sarah Chen, the student, wanted to believe in simple reconnaissance missions, Captain Ghost knew that before this was over, they would be fighting for their lives against an enemy that had spent years planning revenge. The question was whether her new team would be ready when that moment came, or if she would have to carry the burden of command alone once again. Their ship, the Nightwind, was a modified courier vessel designed to look unremarkable while packing enough firepower to handle unexpected encounters. As they approached the first target system, Sarah found herself on the bridge, officially serving as tactical advisor, but privately reliving memories of commanding much larger vessels into much deadlier situations. "Passive sensors are picking up something," Rachel announced from the pilot's seat. "Multiple energy signatures in the asteroid belt around the fourth planet." Sarah leaned forward, studying the readouts. The patterns were familiar in a way that made her stomach clench. "Those aren't mining operations. How can you tell?" Lisa asked. "Energy distribution is wrong for industrial equipment," Sarah explained, falling back on technical knowledge to mask her instant recognition of Vorthan power signatures. "Mining lasers have a different frequency pattern." Marcus ran a deeper scan from his engineering station. "She's right. Those signatures match military-grade fusion reactors. Lots of them." Kane checked his weapons systems. "So much for this being a reconnaissance-only mission." "We stick to the plan," Lisa said firmly. "We observe, gather intelligence, and report back. No unnecessary risks." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to explain that with Vorthans there was no such thing as unnecessary risks. Every moment they remained in the system increased the chance of detection, and once the aliens knew they were there, running would become exponentially more difficult. But Agent Rivera wouldn't know that. Agent Rivera would follow orders and trust her commander's judgment. "Taking us in closer," Rachel announced, using the asteroid field for cover as they approached the energy signatures. What they found made the entire team fall silent. Hidden among the larger asteroids was a construction facility unlike anything in the intelligence reports. Vorthan ships moved in precise patterns around massive cylindrical structures that pulsed with ominous energy. But these weren't the sleek, organic designs from the war. These ships were angular, brutal-looking vessels that seemed designed for a different kind of warfare entirely. "My God," Marcus whispered. "How long have they been building this?" Sarah studied the tactical display, her mind automatically cataloging ship types and estimating force strength. What she saw chilled her to the bone. This wasn't just a military buildup. This was preparation for total war. "Those aren't just warships," she said quietly. "Look at the size of those construction bays. They're building something massive." Lisa enhanced the display, focusing on the largest structure. "It's got to be 5 kilometers long. What could they possibly need something that big for?" Sarah knew, but she couldn't say it without revealing knowledge that Agent Rivera shouldn't possess. During the war, Vorthan's strategic doctrine had always favored overwhelming force applied at critical points. A ship that size could only have one purpose. "We need to get closer," Kane said. "Get detailed scans of those construction facilities." "Too risky," Lisa replied. "We've got what we came for. Evidence of Vorthan military buildup. Command can decide how to respond." "Commander," Sarah said carefully, "I respectfully suggest we try to gather more intelligence. If they're building something that large, it could change the entire strategic balance." Before Lisa could respond, warning alarms filled the bridge. "Contact," Rachel announced tersely. 3 ships moving to intercept." "They've seen us." The tactical display updated to show Vorthan vessels emerging from behind asteroids, their approach vectors designed to cut off escape routes. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the formation. It was a hunter-killer pattern, designed to trap and destroy infiltrators. "Evasive maneuvers," Lisa ordered. "Get us out of here." "They're jamming our communications," Marcus reported. "Can't reach command." Sarah watched the Vorthan ships move with deadly precision, their coordination speaking to years of practice and preparation. These weren't the desperate, disorganized forces from the end of the last war. These were elite units operating with confidence and superior technology. "They're faster than our intelligence suggested," Rachel said through gritted teeth as she pushed the Nightwind to its limits. "And their weapons range has improved." Energy beams lanced past the ship as the Vorthans opened fire. The shots were precise, calculated to disable rather than destroy. They wanted prisoners. "Return fire," Lisa ordered. Kane's weapons found their marks, but the Vorthan shields absorbed the damage easily. "Our weapons aren't penetrating their defenses. It's like they upgraded everything." Sarah felt the familiar weight of command decisions pressing down on her. She could see tactical solutions that might save them. maneuvers that could exploit weaknesses in the Vorthon formation. But using that knowledge would reveal who she really was. As another barrage of enemy fire rocked the ship, she made her choice. "Lisa, trust me for 30 seconds, she said, moving toward the navigation controls. "I need to pilot." "Rivera, what are you—" "Please," Sarah interrupted, meeting the commander's eyes. "I know how to get us out of this." Something in her voice, some authority that went beyond her supposed rank, made Lisa step aside. Sarah's hands flew over the controls, and suddenly the night wind was moving in patterns that seemed to defy physics. She dove toward the largest asteroid, using its gravitational field to slingshot around and reverse course. The Vorthon ships, committed to their intercept vectors, found themselves overextended as their target suddenly appeared behind them. "Impossible," one of the Vorthon pilots transmitted in their clicking language. Sarah understood every word, though she pretended not to. She used their moment of confusion to accelerate toward a narrow gap between asteroids, a space that looked too small for their ship to navigate. But Sarah had flown through tighter spaces during the war, and she knew the Night Wind's capabilities better than its designers did. The Vorthons tried to follow, but their larger ships couldn't match the maneuver. By the time they had repositioned, the Night Wind was already at the edge of the system, jumping to hyperspace. As the ship entered the safety of faster-than-light travel, the bridge fell silent. Finally, Kane spoke up. "Where the hell did you learn to fly like that?" Sarah kept her eyes on the navigation display, not trusting herself to meet their stares. "Academy simulator. I spent a lot of time studying evasive maneuvers." It was a thin lie, and she could tell they didn't entirely believe it. But they were alive, and for now that was what mattered. "We need to get this intelligence back to command immediately," Lisa said. "Whatever the Vorthons are building, it's bigger than anything we've seen before." Sarah nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead to the implications. The construction facility was just one of many. The ships they had seen were scout vessels, not the main force. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, humanity's oldest enemy was preparing for a war that would make the last conflict look like a minor skirmish. The galaxy needed its ghost back sooner than anyone realized. The question was whether Sarah could continue hiding her identity long enough to position herself where she could do the most good, or if the truth would come out before she was ready to face it. The debriefing session took place in a secure facility on Luna, far from curious eyes and listening devices. Director Walsh sat at the head of a conference table, his expression grim as he reviewed the intelligence they had gathered. Around the table, Sarah's team looked exhausted but alert, the weight of what they had discovered still sinking in. "This changes everything," Walsh said finally, looking up from the datapad. "The scale of their operation is far beyond our worst-case scenarios." Lisa leaned forward. "Sir, what's our next move? Do we alert the fleet?" "Begin evacuation procedures for the outer colonies." Walsh was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table. "That's complicated, Commander. The infiltration in high command goes deeper than we initially suspected. We've identified 17 senior officers who have been compromised." 17? Marcus whistled low. "How is that even possible?" "The Vorthons are patient," Walsh replied. "Some of these infiltrators have been in place for over a decade. They've been slowly working their way into positions of authority, gathering intelligence and undermining our defensive preparations." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. During the war, she had suspected there were leaks in the command structure, but she had never imagined the scope of Vorthon infiltration was this extensive. "So what do we do?" Kane asked. "If we can't trust high command, who can we trust?" Walsh turned to Sarah, his eyes holding a weight of expectation that made her stomach clench. "That's where Agent Rivera comes in. Or should I say Captain Chen?" The conference room fell dead silent. Sarah felt every eye turn toward her, saw the shock and confusion on her teammates' faces. The careful identity she had built crumbled in an instant. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quietly, but the words sounded hollow even to her. Walsh activated a holographic display showing her academy records, her military service file, and images from the war. Sarah Ghost Chen, youngest captain in fleet history, architect of the victory at Kepler Station, and the woman who single-handedly saved humanity from extinction. Lisa stared at her, understanding dawning. "That's how you knew how to pilot like that. That's how you recognized the Vorthon tactics. You're the ghost," Rachel breathed. "The actual legendary ghost." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her hidden identity finally surface. I didn't want any of you to know. I just wanted to live quietly, to be normal. Normal? Kane laughed, but there was no humor in it. Lady, you're the reason any of us are alive to have this conversation. You're the most famous military commander in human history. Was, Sarah corrected. That person died with the war. I'm just Sarah now. Walsh leaned forward. I'm afraid that's not an option anymore, Captain. The situation has escalated beyond our ability to handle through conventional channels. We need the ghost back. Marcus looked between Walsh and Sarah, pieces clicking into place. You planned this from the beginning. You knew who she was when you recruited the team. I suspected Agent Rivera was more than she appeared, Walsh admitted, but I needed confirmation that she could still function under pressure. Your escape from the Vorthon facility proved that her tactical abilities remain intact. Sarah felt a familiar anger building, the same frustration that had driven her to disappear in the first place. You used my team as test subjects. You put their lives at risk to evaluate my performance. I put their lives at risk to save billions of others, Walsh shot back. Because right now you're the only person I trust who has the knowledge and experience to stop what's coming. What exactly is coming? Lisa asked, her voice steady despite the revelations swirling around the room. Walsh manipulated the holographic display, showing intelligence reports from across human space. Based on your reconnaissance and other sources, we've identified the Vorthon strategy. They're not planning another conventional war. They're planning total extermination. The display showed shipping lanes, colony worlds, and military installations, all marked with estimated attack timeframes. The massive ships you observed are planet killers, each one capable of reducing an entire world to rubble. They plan to systematically destroy every human settlement, starting with the outer colonies and working inward. Sarah studied the projections, her tactical mind automatically analyzing timelines and resource allocations. How long do we have? Based on construction rates and deployment patterns, 6 weeks, maybe 8 if we're lucky. And you want me to stop this with what exactly? Sarah asked. I don't have a fleet anymore. I don't have a command structure. I'm one person, Walsh smiled grimly. You're not one person, Captain. You have the loyalty of every person who served under you during the war, and more importantly, you have something the Vorthons don't expect, which is, they think you're dead. Every strategic calculation they've made assumes that humanity's greatest tactical mind is no longer a factor. Your return would disrupt their planning in ways they can't anticipate. Lisa looked around the table at her team. We're in, Captain. Whatever you need. You don't understand what you're volunteering for, Sarah warned. This won't be a clean military operation with clear objectives and extraction plans. If we do this, we'll be operating completely on our own, with no support and no backup. Kane shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time. Besides, I've always wanted to meet a real legend. Rachel nodded enthusiastically. Same here. Plus, someone needs to teach those alien bastards that you don't mess with humanity. Marcus was more thoughtful. My daughter lives on New Geneva. If the Vorthons are planning to hit the outer colonies first, he met Sarah's eyes. I'm in, Captain. Whatever it takes. Sarah looked around the table at these people who had become her team, her responsibility. They were looking at her with the same expression she remembered from her old crew, a mixture of trust and determination that both humbled and terrified her. If we do this, she said finally, we do it my way. No second guessing, no political interference, and no unnecessary heroics. We're not trying to win a glorious victory. We're trying to save the human race. Walsh nodded. What do you need? Sarah stood up, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to fully embrace the identity she had tried so hard to leave behind. A ship, a real ship, not a courier vessel. Something with enough firepower to make the Vorthons notice us. And then, Sarah's smile was cold and sharp, the expression that had earned her the nickname Ghost during the darkest days of the war. Then we remind them why they were so eager to make peace the first time. The legendary Captain Chen was back, and the galaxy was about to remember why humanity's enemies feared the dark between the stars. The ship Walsh provided was the Valkyrie, a heavy cruiser that had been officially decommissioned but secretly maintained for black operations. As Sarah walked through its corridors for the first time, she felt the familiar comfort of being aboard a real warship again. The Valkyrie was smaller than the vessels she had commanded during the war, but it was fast, well-armed, and most importantly, it was hers. She's beautiful, Rachel said, running her hands over the pilot's console. Dual fusion engines, military-grade shields, and enough firepower to level a small moon. Marcus was already deep in the engineering sections, his excited voice echoing through the comm system. Captain, this ship has modifications I've never seen before. Stealth plating, adaptive armor, and weapon systems that aren't in any manual I know. Experimental technology, Sarah explained, some of it based on captured Vorthan designs from the war. Over the following days, she put her team through intensive training, pushing them harder than any of them had been pushed before. But she also shared knowledge that had never made it into official training manuals. Tactical insights gained through years of fighting an alien enemy that thought in fundamentally different ways. The key to fighting Vorthans, she explained during one session, is understanding that they see warfare as a form of art. Every engagement is a canvas for them to demonstrate superiority. They prefer elegant solutions over brute force. Kane studied the alien ship schematics on the training display. So we hit them with brute force? No, Sarah corrected. We hit them with chaos. Vortans hate unpredictability. Their entire tactical doctrine is based on careful planning and precise execution. If we can force them to react instead of act, we can exploit their psychological weaknesses. As they trained, Sarah also began reaching out through carefully encrypted channels to old contacts from the war. Not everyone believed she was really alive, and some who did were angry that she had stayed hidden for so long. But gradually a network began to form. Lieutenant Commander Torres, who had served as her tactical officer at Kepler Station, was now running security for a mining consortium. Within hours of hearing from Sarah, he had quietly diverted 3 armed freighters to support her mission. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the former chief medical officer of the 3rd Fleet, was working at a civilian hospital. She arrived at their staging area with a shipment of military-grade medical supplies and a determination to see the war truly ended this time. Chief Petty Officer Jackson, her old communications specialist, brought something even more valuable: a complete intelligence network of former military personnel who had scattered across human space but never stopped watching for signs of renewed Vorthan activity. It's like the old crew is getting back together, Lisa observed as more familiar faces arrived at their hidden base. Not all of them, Sarah said quietly. Too many of the faces she remembered were memorialized on walls she couldn't bear to visit, but enough had survived, and they brought with them the kind of expertise that couldn't be taught in any academy. Their target was ambitious: the main Vorthan construction facility they had discovered, along with 2 others that intelligence had identified. Sarah's plan was to strike all 3 simultaneously, crippling the alien fleet before it could deploy. The timing has to be perfect, she explained to the assembled team leaders. If even one facility escapes destruction, they'll accelerate their timeline. We get one chance at this. Dr. Vasquez raised a concern. Sarah, the intelligence reports suggest minimal crew at these facilities. But what if they're wrong? What if we're walking into a trap? Sarah had considered the same possibility. The facility locations were almost too convenient, the defenses lighter than expected. But every instinct told her that the threat was real, and waiting would only make the situation worse. It's possible, she admitted, but the alternative is letting them complete their planet killers and watching billions of innocent people die. I'd rather face a trap than live with that outcome. The night before their mission, Sarah found herself alone on the Valkyrie's bridge, staring out at the stars. She thought about the student she had been just weeks ago, sitting in lectures and worrying about assignments. That life felt like a dream now, a brief respite from the reality of who she truly was. Second thoughts? Lisa joined her at the observation window. Always, Sarah replied. But that's what keeps you alive in this business. The moment you stop questioning your decisions is the moment you start making fatal mistakes. The crew believes in you, Lisa said. They've all heard the stories, but seeing you in action, it's something else entirely. Sarah smiled sadly. They shouldn't believe in me too much. Heroes have a tendency to disappoint people when the reality doesn't match the legend. Maybe. But legends have a tendency to inspire people to be better than they thought they could be. As they prepared for departure, Sarah received one final transmission that changed everything. It was from Director Walsh, and his face was grim with new intelligence. Captain, we've intercepted Vorthan communications. They know you're alive. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. How? Unknown. But they've accelerated their timeline. The attack on the outer colonies begins in 72 hours. And Sarah, They're not just sending planet killers, they're sending their entire fleet. Everything they've built over the past years. The transmission continued with updated intelligence, enemy fleet compositions, and strategic assessments that painted a picture of overwhelming odds. When it ended, the bridge was silent. "So," Kane said finally, "still think we can pull this off?" Sarah looked around at her team, these people who had chosen to follow her into impossible odds. She thought about the colonies full of families who had no idea what was coming. She thought about the peace she had fought so hard to achieve and the quiet life she was giving up to preserve it. "The Vorthans made one critical mistake," she said, moving to the captain's chair. "They think knowing I'm alive gives them an advantage. But what they don't understand is that the ghost was never about surprise attacks or hidden identities." She settled into the command chair, feeling the weight of responsibility and authority flow back into her like an old friend. The ghost was about being the nightmare that keeps monsters awake in the dark, and right now, the galaxy needs its nightmares more than its dreams. The Valkyrie began moving toward the outer system, carrying with it humanity's last hope, and the legend who had never really stopped being who she was meant to be. Behind them, space seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if the ghost could save the galaxy one more time. The battle began in the void between stars, where massive Vorthon construction platforms hung like metal cities against the cosmic darkness. Sarah's strike force consisted of 12 ships total, a pitiful force against the hundreds of alien vessels guarding the facilities. But she had learned long ago that victory wasn't always about superior numbers. "All units remember the plan," Sarah transmitted to her small fleet. "We're not here to win a fair fight. We're here to make them think twice about starting an unfair one." The Valkyrie led the charge, its stealth systems allowing them to penetrate deep into the enemy formation before detection. Sarah watched the tactical display with the cold focus that had made her legendary, seeing patterns and opportunities that others would miss. "Target the primary construction bay," she ordered. "Marcus, I need everything those engines can give us." "You've got it, Captain," came the engineer's reply. "But we can't maintain this power output for long." "We won't need long." The first phase of the attack caught the Vorthons completely off guard. Sarah's ships struck simultaneously at 3 different facilities, their weapons precisely targeting critical support structures. The aliens had expected a desperate frontal assault, not surgical strikes designed to maximize psychological impact. "Construction platform Alpha is breaking apart," Lisa reported. "The cascade failure is spreading through their docking bays." But Sarah knew the real battle was just beginning. Vorthon reinforcements were already moving to respond, and soon her small force would be facing overwhelming odds. That was when she activated the second phase of her plan. "Jackson, initiate Ghost Protocol," she commanded. Throughout human space, hidden transmitters began broadcasting on Vorthon frequencies. The messages were recordings of Sarah's voice speaking, in the alien language, delivering psychological warfare designed to exploit their deepest fears. "You remember me," her voice echoed across their communications network. "You remember how your fleets burned in the darkness. You remember how your certainty crumbled when you faced something you couldn't predict or control." The effect on the Vorthon fleet was immediate and profound. Ships began breaking formation, commanders demanding explanations that their superiors couldn't provide. The careful coordination that was their greatest strength started to unravel. "It's working," Kane reported from the weapons station. "Their response time is dropping. They're second-guessing their own orders." But the Vorthons were learning quickly, adapting to her tactics even as she implemented them. Their fleet commanders began issuing override protocols, forcing their ships back into formation through sheer authority. "Phase 3, Sarah announced calmly. Time to remind them why they were so eager to sign a peace treaty. She had saved the most dangerous part of the plan for last. The Valkyrie broke from the main engagement and headed directly toward the Yama, largest Vorthon vessel, a massive dreadnought that served as the fleet's command center. "Captain," Rachel said from the pilot's seat, "that ship outguns us 20-1. This is suicide." "No," Sarah replied, her eyes fixed on the approaching alien vessel. "This is theater." As they closed distance with the dreadnought, Sarah opened a direct communication channel to its bridge. The alien commander who appeared on screen was one she recognized from the war, a veteran who had survived their previous encounters through caution and tactical brilliance. Commander Thekval, she said in perfect Vorthon. You know who I am. The alien's expression shifted from confidence to something approaching fear. The ghost. But you are dead. Our intelligence confirmed it. Did it? Sarah smiled coldly. Your intelligence has been wrong about many things, like assuming humanity would accept extinction quietly. Your fleet is small, Thekval replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice. You cannot stop what has already begun. I don't need to stop it, Sarah said. I just need to remind you what happens when you underestimate human determination. She cut the transmission and nodded to Kane. Fire everything we have at their command deck. The Valkyrie's weapons struck the dreadnought's shields with concentrated fury, causing barely noticeable damage to the massive vessel. But that wasn't the point. The point was to demonstrate that she was willing to attack impossible odds, to show the kind of desperate courage that had made humanity so dangerous during the war. All ships, converge on my position, she transmitted to her fleet. Time to show them what humans do when we're backed into a corner. Her small force gathered around the Valkyrie, facing the entire Vorthan fleet in open space. It should have been the end of the story, a noble but futile last stand against overwhelming odds. Instead, it was the moment when everything changed. New contacts appeared on the tactical display, dozens of ships dropping out of hyperspace around the battle. At first, Sarah thought they were Vorthan reinforcements, but then Jackson's voice crackled with excitement. Captain, those are human ships. It's the 3rd Fleet, the 7th, and, my God, it's everyone. The entire home fleet is here. Director Walsh's voice came over the communication system. Sorry we're late, Captain. It took some time to root out the infiltrators and convince High Command that the Ghost knew what she was talking about. The tide of battle shifted in an instant. The Vorthan fleet, already demoralized by Sarah's psychological warfare, found themselves facing the full might of humanity's military forces. But more than that, they found themselves facing a united, human response led by the one commander they had never been able to defeat. This is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Fleet, Sarah transmitted to the alien commander. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from human space, or we'll finish what we started during the war. The Vorthon response was swift and decisive. Their ships began retreating immediately, abandoning their construction facilities and planet-killer weapons in their haste to escape human space. But Sarah wasn't finished. As the alien fleet fled, she opened one final transmission to their retreating ships. Tell your leaders that humanity remembers its heroes, she said, and we remember our enemies. If you ever threaten innocent people again, the Ghost will find you. And next time, I won't be so merciful. The battle was over, but Sarah remained. On the bridge, long after the last Vorthan ship had disappeared into hyperspace, her team gathered around her, exhausted but victorious. So what happens now? Lisa asked. Do you go back to being a student? Sarah considered the question seriously. The quiet life had been appealing, but the past weeks had reminded her of something important. Some people were meant to live in the shadows, protecting others from threats they couldn't imagine. No, she said finally. Sarah the student was a nice dream, but the galaxy still needs its ghosts. There are always monsters in the dark, and someone has to keep watch. She looked around at her team, these people who had followed her through impossible odds and somehow survived. Besides, I think I've found my real classroom, and these are the only students I need. As the Valkyrie set course for home, Sarah settled back into the captain's chair. She had saved the galaxy again, but more importantly, she had remembered who she was meant to be. The war hero, the legend, the ghost who haunted humanity's enemies and protected its children. Some people were meant for ordinary lives, for quiet happiness and simple dreams, but some were meant to stand guard in the darkness, to be the nightmare that kept monsters awake at night. Captain Sarah Ghost Chen was exactly where she belonged, and the galaxy was safer for it. In the academies and universities across human space, students would continue to study her tactics and debate her strategies, but they would never know that their legendary hero was still out there, still watching, still ready to answer when humanity needed its ghost to return from the shadows. And that was exactly how she preferred it.